All right, hello again, everyone. Thanks so much for being with me. I'm Frederica Whitfield. GOP delegates worried about their safety say they will be bringing guns to the Republican convention later on this month. They say violent protests at Trump rallies and the threat of terror attacks are enough to convince them to take their safety into their own hands. CNN White House producer Kristen Holmes talked to one of those delegates and is joining us right now live from Washington. Good to see you, Kristen. So they can't bring guns into the convention hall, but that doesn't necessarily apply to all of the surrounding events?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. The U.S. Secret Service, they told us that there is a secure perimeter, and that is, as you mentioned, the arena and the immediate surrounding areas. But anything outside of that, Secret Service says they're deferring to Ohio state laws. Now, Ohio is an open carry state, which means that people who have legally purchased firearms can carry them in any public area, parks, streets, outside of that secure perimeter. Now, in that area, there will be events. There are also designated protest areas within there. So as you mentioned, I did speak with a Pennsylvania delegate, James Klein, who said he and his wife will both be taking firearms to protect themselves from violence that he's seen at rallies as well as possible terrorist threats. Here's what he had to say.
There were violent activities at Trump rallies. Later, of course, there has been a lot of activity by ISIS, or ISIS. And in all candor, this adds a level of seriousness to the threat. I would think that this would be a big target. If they're clearly they're not afraid of dying. In fact, they seek death. But I was elected to go, and that is my duty. And I can't be intimidated. I can't allow myself to be intimidated and to betray the people who elected me. If the police handle it, great. If there's nothing that happens, even greater. But I think that none of us can really count on nothing happening, ever.
And Fred, I did push him on that, asking him if he was concerned at all about potentially mixing people who were armed with unarmed civilians and protesters. And he said that he was trained and would not use lethal force unless it was necessary.
Okay, and so Kristen, to underscore, there's a list of what you can, what you can't bring, into this area. These are items that are banned from the Republican National Convention: swords, switchblades, nunchucks, hatchets, drones, fireworks, containers of things, glass bottles, lasers, ladders. I mean, it's a very peculiar list. What's behind this?
Oh, yeah. Also on the list was sleeping bags, tennis balls, pieces of rope or tape that were over a certain length there. And these were set by the Republican National Committee. Now, when we did ask again the Secret Service about this, and as well as the Republican National Committee, they are deferring us to Ohio state law, which just says that when it comes to guns, they will let it be an open carry state, and they are allowing firearms, but they aren't allowing, as you mentioned, sleeping bags, tennis balls, glass bottles, anything that can be thrown. And again, those aren't things that you need a license to have, whereas a firearm, you do need a license to have.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much from Washington. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to bring back now Democratic strategist Jim Kessler, who is a former policy director for the group Americans for Gun Safety, and Scottie Nell Hughes, political editor for RightAlerts.com, a Donald Trump supporter and a gun owner as well. All right, good to see you both. Okay, so what about this list? This is a very unusual list. Scottie, how will this be interpreted?
Well, this is a very hard issue for me, I'll be honest with you. Not only going to my third RNC and knowing the chaos and commotion that goes into the typical political convention, but also this year my family will be attending as members and delegates themselves. So this is very hard for me to sit there and say when emotions are so high on the inside, a bunch of people having, firearms kind of scares me. I'm one of those that usually believe in a case like this, it's best to leave it to law enforcement. But on the outside, however, is where I believe where most people are afraid of the danger. After looking at the rallies of San Bernardino. And we already know that there is going to be some very large, very contested protests, like always. And so, what is the right of these delegates?
There will be reinforcements of security, and that should be the reassurance, would it not? Particularly outside of the perimeter at these other, events. And doesn't that send a message enough to people that they should feel safe and secure? They don't necessarily have to be prepared to take matters into their own hands.
Well, absolutely. But here's the thing. First of all, I like the idea of surprise, where people do not know whether or not these folks are carrying or not. I myself, my husband, we're both concealed carry handgun owners. People will not know whether or not we're actually going to have a gun on us, or if we're going to have any sort of weapon. I do think this is where the governors of these states could step up and help alleviate it. And by saying, you know what, we're going to send protection. We're going to send state troopers. We're going to send state protection for these delegations. And I believe it should be at the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, both. And I think if we sat there and overwhelmingly show there's law enforcement protecting these delegates as they go from event to event, I think that will help subdue some of this fear that might be having within the delegations.
Okay, arming oneself not only top of mind at the conventions, but we're also talking on Capitol Hill. In fact, this week, the House is set to vote on a GOP-sponsored gun bill, but the Democrats oppose it. Among the key provisions are the Department of Justice would have 3 days to prove whether a suspected terrorist should be allowed to own a gun. It would require Homeland Security to step up its efforts against radical terrorism, and it would revoke U.S. passports from members of designated terror organizations. So, Jim, what is the mindset of why some Democrats would be against this, and of course many Republicans for it?
Well, first of all, let's just say thank goodness that the Republican convention is outlawing water pistols there, because I think that's the thing that we really need to worry about here. Look, there's a bill being brought to the House floor. There was a sit-in by Democrats demanding a vote on guns after Orlando. Speaker Paul Ryan had a choice of either caving to Democrats or caving to the National Rifle Association. He's trying to do a little bit of both. This is a National Rifle Association-backed bill. It is completely unworkable. That's what law enforcement says. It's the
what part of it being unworkable? I mean, so clearly both sides are saying they want to do something, but they can't come together on what that thing is. So why is this unworkable?
Okay,
law enforcement.
Both sides want to do something, but Republicans who are in control want to do something that also gets the sign-off for the National Rifle Association, and that is proving to be an impossible task. So the only thing that they're doing is a scheme that basically kill first and then deny the gun later. You have to prove that the person is a terrorist before that person is denied a gun, where the other lists these are folks that are suspected terrorists. That was what the bill was in the Senate. That was a bipartisan bill. And then if you are denied a firearm because you are on one of these two pretty discrete watch lists, you can at that point appeal that decision. But this one, they have to prove first, and they have 3 days to prove that when somebody's going to buy a gun, that they are in fact terrorists. I mean, who are we kidding? That is not going to work.
So Scottie, is this underscoring that criticism that, the Republicans are too much in the pocket of the NRA, unwilling to do something until the NRA endorses or gives a thumbs up on a measure?
No, I think this is Republicans actually working with Democrats and not acting like children and throwing a temper tantrum and sitting on the floor. I think this is actually great for Paul Ryan to do. Because for Republicans, this is a question about constitutional rights and the due process. And it should be a no-brainer since we are the majority. So if they do pass it, they say, listen, we are trying to make a difference. We are trying to stop terrorists from getting guns in their hands. And I think Democrats should recognize that and at least take the step to work with them on it. And you can always encourage that increase as need be. But let's get something on the books. And the Republicans at least are saying, listen, you're either going to stand and you're going to help us keep these guns out of terrorists' hands, or you're going to sit there and do a sit-in on the floor just to get whatever provisions that we want that take away the due process and constitutional rights as we think here in America.
All right.
It's pretty simple. The Second Amendment either extends to terrorists or it does not. Democrats think it does not. Republicans aren't really sure.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
All right.
We're talking about international terrorism here, but that's another conversation.
All right. And another conversation, Scottie, many would take issue with the temper tantrum in the fact that protest is as American as apple pie.
Yeah, but there's rules that involve in the House right here. And why are you going to sit there and reward children that throw a temper tantrum and not expect them to do it again for every other issue they don't get their way on?
As long as there's no water pistols.
For a reason. There you go. that we can agree on. No water pistols on the congressional floor.
All right, Scottie, Nell, Hughes, Jim Kessler, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, of course, we're also continuing to monitor a situation developing right now in New York City. The bomb squad is on a scene there in Central Park after an explosion injured one person. Police are still trying to figure out what caused the explosion. Could fireworks this holiday weekend have anything to do with it? A teenager is in surgery, we understand, after part of his leg was severed in that blast.
I have no idea what it was. It sounded like a cannon. So that's why I thought it was like a 4th of July thing.
All right, the area around the incident still closed, but the rest of the park remains open to the public. Much more right after this.